You will not believe what we're talking about next. A West End play is going to hold exclusive all-black audience nights in order to protect those theatre-goers from what they call white gaze. Yes, really. Joining me right now to discuss this is Rakib Ehsan. He's a social policy analyst and writer. Rakib, thank you for joining us. I'm wondering, so you'd be allowed to buy tickets for this play, but Claire Pearsall is a former Home Office advisor, and myself, we would not be allowed to do that because of our white gaze. I genuinely, this is the sort of thing you'd read in a satirical magazine a few years ago. The play is called Slave Play. It stars Kit Harington. We knew him, of course, as Jon Snow in Game of Thrones in HBO. And it's going to be at the Noel Coward Theatre in London's West End from late June to mid-September. But on 2 evenings, in July and September, the theatre will be open to an all-black identifying audience. Aha! I spotted the flaw in this. If Claire and I identify as black, presumably we'd be allowed to go and they couldn't query it. But what do you make of this, Rakib?
Well, first, I'll make the point, Julia, is I have no intention of buying a ticket at all. It's something that we've discussed before, the deeply segregationist nature of modern racial identity politics. Now, I saw an interview given by Jeremy O. Harris, and what was really interesting...
Who is he?
So he's supposed to be behind this.
Yes.
He's American playwright and actor, born in 1989. But what was remarkable, Julia, was that he was cosplaying as some kind of 1950s/60s civil rights activist in the segregated Deep South.
Yeah.
It's quite remarkable. And what he's looking to do is normalize what I consider to be a particularly aggressive form of neo-segregation in the West End in 2024. Yeah. And I think what's really telling about the interview as well is how he uses Britain and America interchangeably when he talks about racial equality. And that's something that I've contested for some time. I'm sure, Julia, you know the Battle of Bamber Bridge, for example, in World War II, where you had British civilians, pub landlords in a Lancastrian village, resist the efforts of American commanders who wanted to enforce racial segregation on British soil. So I think that the interview is just littered with so much nonsense.
Yeah.
And I think what it really shows is it's almost a form of American cultural imperialism coming into play and really affecting social relations in our society.
And our culturals, we don't have a history. The people who came to this country or who of colour came to this country freely. They weren't brought on slave ships.
Indeed.
I know we've got our colonial history in America, but nevertheless, we were the country that actually spent a fortune, quite rightly, to end the transatlantic slave trade. Yes, our country benefited from it. Every empire has benefited from slavery. There are empires still benefiting from slavery as well. You look at countries like China, which, to all intents and purposes, enslave Uyghur people and others. But this is the thing. But we never had laws that prevented black people from, owning property or being able to vote or being able to attend certain schools. We don't have that history. And yet I think so many young people who are now, white and black, are thinking that we did, when that's not our history. Of course it's not all been bright and beautiful and wonderful. And of course there's been no black child or white child, who hasn't been involved in, a racial attack or as the victim or the perpetrator. Of course not. But the American history is not ours. It's very, very, very different, isn't it? But what I find extraordinary about this is so much of this whole supposedly diversity issue, and we've just talked about that with Pets at Home, is actually, it's about separating us. When I was growing up, and I went to school in America, and when this was still quite a live issue in the 70s, which was actually about, you were about ending segregation, about bringing people together, where schools would, for instance, bus black and white kids to schools in different neighbourhoods to make sure they mixed. Now, American universities, even British universities, playwrights want to separate us.
No, absolutely. And that's why I'm firmly against this concept of safe spaces, for example, on university campuses. I think university campuses should be hubs of robust critical thinking, where disagreement is welcome, as long as it's in good faith and spirit. I think more generally what we're looking at here is people that they're not, and the arts, for example, I thought that'd be one sphere of life where that sort of intercultural knowledge exchange should be particularly encouraged. So
from what I can gather from people who work in the arts, it's actually one of the worst places, and people are losing work on a...
So in a sense...
We saw Lawrence Fox. He said that his great crime on Question Time all that time ago was to say, I don't think this is a racist country. That was his great crime. What a terrible thing to say. I know exactly what my audience right now are doing. They are shouting at the TV saying, if you had an only white night, only white people able to buy tickets, or people who identify as white, to protect them from black gays, we'd have a word for that. And we all know what that word is. It begins with R. It's racism.
Oh yeah, racism.
It
No,
is.
racism, absolutely.
This is racist.
I
Is
think
this even legal? Should this even be legal?
in my view, it shouldn't be. I know that many people say, "Oh, but that would be an assault on freedom of assembly." But my main point here is that I think that we are one of the most successful multiracial democracies, if not the most advanced. And I don't really want to see this US-inspired racial identity politics destabilizing that. And I think that it does pose a very serious threat. And I think really, if you want to break down barriers in terms of mutual understanding and respect, I think this is the worst way to go about it, Julia.
Hear to that. Rakib Ehsan, a social policy analyst and writer, thank you very much. Now, it wouldn't be fascinating, of course, the situation where we just talked about pets at home. So a female member of staff at Pets at Home would have to put up with a man who just says he doesn't have to be dressed as a woman or have any, just says, I believe I identify as a woman, walking into the toilets, not allowed to say anything. So under a male gaze, whilst in the loos when you're, you know, but the idea here is that black people shouldn't have to put up with white gaze, as if in some way that is a bad thing. It's basically saying you are, by definition, bad if you are white, you're intimidatory, you are in some way victimising black people. That is incredibly insulting.
Yes, it is. And if you turned it round the other way, it would be, in fact, illegal. So I don't see how this can be allowed to stand.
I can't believe that it is.
If it was a white-only space, that would be inciting sort of, you know, racism, racial hatred, all the rest of it.
I'm going to buy a ticket. I'm going to say that I'm identifying as a black man, and I'm going to go.
I think we should.
I don't believe for a moment this could be legal. This should not be allowed.
I really don't think it is. I think there's going to have to be some kind of investigation into it, because I don't think you should be allowed. How many black people actually believe there to be white gays as well? Because this is one person, this is one playwright who is putting this out there. I think the majority of people in London would just go, come if you want, come if you don't want.
Even if they're just doing this as a PR stunt. Oh, well done, we're talking about it. You know, you should be ashamed of yourself.
It's the lowest of the low.
It really is. But anyway, that ends the madness for me for this week, certainly. Claire, it's fabulous having you joining us. Lots of breaking news this morning. Way Cousins' latest asylum figures and all of that. And